may be.
Yeah. Well, good morning, folks.
Hello.
I'm Bob Brown, and this is B Cube Sunday Morning, and we are indeed live this morning, and it is Second Sunday. And Second Sunday, you know what that means? That means we've got Tom Whitmore here, you know, the man with the books in the basement, and behind him, and on shelves, and in drawers, and other places with art hanging everywhere. He is going to bring you some guests that I shall let him introduce as he talks about concept of freelance versus in-house and all the other good things a writer should know with his expert panel. Take it away, Tom, and I'm gonna go.
All right, thank you, Bob. Let us just toss in a quick word in favor of B Cubed Press and their books. You can see several of them behind one of my two guests, that being Karen, on her rack of books she's been published in. We have a discussion today about what I wished I'd known before I became a freelance writer. We have KG Arenderson. That's her writing name. You can find her stuff at writerway.com. We've got John Hedtke, who is a major force in the technical writing world and who always drinks to excess in the mornings, which is why he's just opened a can. And we're going to talk about writing, the writing life, and why do it? What's good about being not a person who is like everybody else in many ways? And each of you can give a better introduction of yourself than I can. So I will ask John to say a few words about himself first, and then we'll get into our discussion.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's see. Been a technical writer for 40 years, 27 books, a couple hundred magazine articles published, a total of over 8 million words in print, which means I can now commit the perfect crime because I no longer have any fingerprints. And as of Monday next, I'll be starting a new job, which doing the same thing. But I'm very pleased they're giving me a 50% raise, and it's like, wow.
I hear great applause from the background from that.
Oh, it's like,
yes.
Oh baby, I had not expected anything this generous, and I'm just kind of wallowing in it.
Yes. Proving that writing is something that you can do for your entire life. And Karen, would you care to say a couple of words about yourself, and then we'll get going?
Yeah. I've been at work since I was old, and I have not been able to sustain a freelance. It's something I go in oddly freelanceable for me to do the kind of thing gotten real jobs.
Karen, you're breaking up.
Okay, I'm better.
There. Okay.
No.
I
give it a whirl.
Better?
Nope. You're
okay.
Continuing to drop out.
Let me do something different with my tech. Go to John.
Okay. So, John, I was going to ask Karen this question, but I'll ask you first. Right. When did you know you were a writer?
When I started writing, and I don't have any training in this. I don't have any specific background in this. I was actually a programmer, and in 1982 was fed up with the system that I was maintaining, not having any documentation. And so I finally got to the point of, God damn it, I'll write some myself. I still have the manuals that I wrote for this thing. And the last time I looked at them was at least over a decade ago. And oh my God, they're awful. You know, it's like first person plural, future tense, passive voice. You know, it's like when when I got out of being a programmer and then moved into being a technical writer officially, my writing improved substantially, very quickly, and quite happy about that. You know, the stuff that I actually started writing was much better, but I keep this stuff around because it's an important part of my history. It's how I got started. I actually have, in the way of education, I have a high school diploma.
Good for you.
Yeah, and a year and a half of highly unsuccessful academic background at Reed College, and that's pretty much it. You know, it's like all of this stuff I picked up on the fly, and here I am, a great career later.
Yeah. Well, how did you know that you wanted to stay in it?
I like doing it. I was sick of programming.
Mhm.
I'm still sick of programming, for that matter. I was very good at doing programming, but no, I really like writing. I was looking for work as a writer and as a trainer, and the writer part came first.
Yes,
So-
Bob, if you're listening, Karen needs to be added back in.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And
Do we have Karen?
yay!
Hey, there we go.
Hear
Victory.
me now.
You know, we really do meet before this thing to try to get all of these bits ironed out, but in this particular case, we didn't.
Yeah, technology.
Yes.
It's why I have a job.
So he didn't write the documentation for the software we're using.
No.
Otherwise, this would be working. Karen, say something. Let's see if we can hear you properly. I'm not hearing a word out of you.
Hold on a second.
There you go.
I can you hear me now? I can't hear you.
You're still
So-
breaking up. I can hear you. I can't hear that. I could hear you asking before. And I'm not just hearing you down the hall.
I'm really sorry. This is very unusual.
Yes, I know. I've been on various things with you before, and it's always worked well. So please
Try
excuse
one
this
other
audience
system.
while we have technical difficulties.
I'm going to disappear.
We're
Okay.
losing her again.
Damn.
Ah. Anyway, so to continue, John.
Yes.
John and I can talk at great length about almost anything. And we hope it's amusing, but we're amused by it, so
Yes.
you will be too. We've lost Karen. That's what that wonderful little beeping sound means. So anyway, to continue. Has, to me, the difference between freelance writing is often you write something and then try to sell it, whereas contract writing is they pay you to write something.
Okay.
Because it is the case that journalists, for example, usually write an article, and fiction writers certainly write an article and then sell it. And being freelance means that you don't have a guaranteed market for what you're doing. Whereas if you're a contract, you have guaranteed payment.
Yes.
Even if you're lying there in bed writing terribly. You can get fired, but you don't have to worry about whether this batch of work will actually get money for it.
I like that distinction. I'm now hearing my voice in your mic. I don't know if that's going out to the rest of the world. Bingo.
Okay.
Yes, I like that distinction. As a technical writer, I have a big distinction between what the writing I do and what the esteemed Ms. Anderson does, for example, and that is that I always have a payment plan lined up before I do anything. Books, articles, everything. It's like there's a contract signed before I put words on paper. And I have always figured that for me, and for a lot of my peers, freelancing was the same as contract. It meant I was writing stuff and I would get paid either by the piece or by the hour, something like that. And the only distinction between that and being a captive somewhere was that I wasn't a captive, that there was no real guarantee, implicit or otherwise, of being employed. It's just usually for that piece of work. And given the, shall we say, fluidity of being captive, the distinctions are fewer and fewer. But it all boils down to, I write shit, they pay me.
No, you get a contract with them, then you write shit, then they pay you.
Yes. Well, and in the case of books, of course, it's like I get a contract and they send me money in advance and then I write stuff. I'm still working on the idea of sign the contract and then they send me a check and it stops there, knowing that they should be happy knowing that I have cashed their check. But I'm still working.
This would be a lovely place to get to. And in some cases, I think there are certain writers that we can say this has happened with.
I think so, yeah.
You get a series going, and then somebody will come in and write it. Even if you don't.
Yes, it's true.
Cheryl Alexander asks, "Are most writers freelance?" The answer is that depends on how you count freelance. In the method that I was defining freelance, most writers probably aren't.
I think that's true.
The majority of people who do technical writing, for example, are either on salary or, like John, have a solid contract to produce things, whereas a freelancer frequently writes things and then has to figure out where to get it to. And these are very different social positions to be in.
Yes.
There's always being on the edge over whether something will sell or not. Most fiction writers, or many fiction writers,
yes,
are freelance. But it's important to remember that not all writers write fiction. As a matter of fact, the majority of people who are writing don't write fiction, except for Karen, who writes everything she writes is fiction, even her articles and newspaper pieces.
No. Can you hear me now?
You're a little slow to pick up.
Well,
not sure why that is very
Yeah, you're
odd.
completely disconnected from your visual. Your sound is just not with your voice.
there's a delta.
Walk into your office.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I hate the idea of us having to do this together, but we could have Karen walk into my office and we could just.
I was going to say the same thing. So
why don't come down now? Bring a chair. So we're breaking the fourth wall here. Not that there's a whole huge amount of room in my office. Here she comes. Yes, we'll need to show you all the chair because the chair is really wonderful.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yes, everything just collapsed in the background, but pay no attention to that.
I precipitated an avalanche.
No, the chair precipitated the avalanche.
Mr. Tippy is trapped.
Yes. Here. I'm going to make another avalanche if I do that, but I'm going to move that slightly out of the way. There we go. There we are.
Hi.
Yes.
Yay!
Yes, if we could. We'll just sit close together.
I want to jump into this on freelancing. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good.
Beautiful.
Okay. Obviously, Tom has the better system. I've been a freelancer since I was 18 years old, and my freelancing has been what allowed me to get relatively permanent, long-paying jobs. Because the problem is, if I had stayed with the relatively permanent jobs, what I would have done would have been so boring and so uninteresting that no one ever would have hired me for a better job. And all the interesting career building stuff that I did as a freelancer. And I came into freelancing as a journalist, and it was at a time at the end of the Vietnam War where they were hiring freelancers because you don't keep a big staff of people to cover wars and demonstrations and rock concerts. For one thing, they might be killed. And two,
especially at the rock
concerts. And two, it was for events. They didn't keep staff. They would just say, something is happening in Washington, D.C. You're in D.C. We will pay you. And often they paid for a hotel. They would pay for some transportation. We will pay you to go there. And then you would get actually a pretty good sum for writing the article. And at the time that I went to journalism school, that was sort of the heyday of the freelance writer. And the freelancing world for journalism really plummeted dramatically after that, unfortunately.
So I had tossed forth a definition of the difference between freelance and contract. Did you hear that when I did?
No, but there's a difference.
Saying basically that in freelance, you're often writing it before you get paid and trying to send it out there. It's not the way most fiction writers seem to approach it.
Yeah, that sometimes happens. Well, I don't normally for freelance write unless I'm pretty sure somebody's going to pay me for it. But I have to come up with the idea and pitch it. And often that's one of the great things about freelance because, for instance, I'm currently, I've been freelancing about home repair. And I know a lot more about working with contractors than my editor does, which means the editor comes up with articles and you're thinking, that's not actually an issue. But I'm out there working with people and their contractors and I know what the issues are. So I pitch a lot of articles and then they pay me to write those. And of course, writing what you're interested in is more fun than writing what the editor thought of. I am involved with another group where I was a contractor for a year. Washington State has some pretty strict laws about how long a company can keep a contractor because they believe that they're hiring contractors so they don't have to pay the state for unemployment tax and stuff like that. I was a contractor for a year and the editor gave me a list of things to do and I did them. And at the end of the year, when I chose not to go full time, they put me on freelance. And what's great about that is the editor gives me a list of things to do and I go, I'll take that and that. No, I don't like this other thing. And it hadn't actually occurred to the editor that I was going to refuse certain assignments, but I do, and it's great.
Mm-hmm.
So, and John was commenting that he doesn't really refuse things when he's on contract.
Generally not. I'm a big fat whore. I will, as long as the money's good, I'm there.
One of the things, have we talked about the fact that if you freelance for a really good organization, it often leads to contract or full-time employment.
No, we have not talked about that yet.
Well, one of the coolest freelance gigs I ever got, which quickly mutated, when Apple had an office in Seattle, they were doing a magazine called iReview, What's Good on the Web and What Should Be Better. And I was asked to apply as a freelancer. And I came in and pitched freelance and got hired as an employee.
Yes, Karen reviewed the internet.
I reviewed the internet. I once reviewed the New York Review of Books. And not only did I review them, they wrote me a letter saying they liked the review. Unfortunately, that did not turn into a gig at the New York Review of Books.
Damn.
And I had gotten the invitation to interview at Apple because I had been freelancing for a pittance for about 2 years for an outstanding, it was a startup at that time, book review called January Magazine, and they're still online. And I had reviewed about 200 mystery books for them. So when Apple said they were looking for reviewers, my freelance experience put me right at the top of the field.
Okay. Neat.
Yeah. So one of the things to know before you become a freelance writer, clearly, is what do you like to write about? And how do you keep your eyes open for situations where you can write about that? And keep your eyes open for someone who'll pay you to write about that.
If you're freelancing, you should not be writing about stupid things because they're probably not paying you enough as a freelancer. The money is in the contracts. But if you're freelancing, you should be writing about stuff that is cool, that is stretching your skills, that is making your portfolio. There are a few people who have made their entire careers out of freelancing. And not contracts. And it's really difficult to do. You have to be up at the really high end. And it's something that people did in the 80s because the cost of living was cheaper. But very often you'll find that freelancers have another source of income, or they're really happy to just, rent a room in somebody's house. It is not lucrative.
Yeah. You're not likely to starve in a garret only because there aren't very many garrets anymore.
Yes.
Yes. Well, it's very true. I'm when I'm lecturing about how to get into the silly business of being an author, one of the things that I tell people is that, I've done 27 books, and it's like having two brag shelves of books and translations and so forth is really cool. But I look at all of them and I go, I didn't directly make much money off these at all. That generally speaking, if I had spent, I used to say half my time, but in fact, I think it's more like if I had spent about a third of the time I spent writing those books, working at McDonald's, and the other 2/3 downloading internet porn, I would have made more money directly and had more fun. However, that's direct.
I don't know. Most of the internet porn is not very good.
You have to know what you like. But indirectly, it has worked to, I've made fortunes. Like the book number 26 was on disaster preparedness, a book that I enjoyed writing very, very much. That was 7 months of work, roughly, for which I got my half of the advance. My co-author got the other half. My half of the advance was $2,500 whole dollars, at 1099 money. So I even had to pay taxes on that. And that was
self-employment taxes on it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that was it. That was $2,500. That's all we made off of that book directly. Indirectly, however, about a year later, I was interviewing with a division of IBM to write disaster preparedness, failover, and internet porn evaluator. I love that. Disaster failover and failback procedures for a big suite of servers. And so I rolled out my technical writing credentials and my technological credentials. And then I said, my favorite trick, closing on interviews. And it's like, and I know you haven't got time to appreciate my writing, just looking at samples and talking about it. So here, let me give you a copy of my book. How shall I autograph it? Boy, howdy, this is a closer. I recommend it to everybody. And I scored a $175,000 contract. So indirectly, writing the book was definitely worth it. And this has frequently been the case for a lot of my books. But, they're a pain in the ass.
I want to talk a little bit about money.
Yes.
When I was younger and I was freelancing, they wrote me a check, and and also they do not pay much more now than they did 30 years ago, which is really depressing. However, the tax situation has gotten more and more complicated. And the other thing that has happened is I've done a lot of, I do web content, obviously, as well as print journalism. And that's where a lot of the money is now. And for some of the web content projects I've worked on, most of them are pretty straightforward. For some of them, they have required that I show errors and omissions insurance. And the way that I show that insurance is it's from the company that does my house insurance and my car insurance. And I'm insured for $250,000 in errors and omissions. This is not something that kind of insurance is something most people are going to have unless they own a house. So, and my business, I have a business that is registered with the state, and I have to pay business taxes locally and at the state level, and it's a real pain. And I often feel completely chewed over by this, because it's not that I'm not making that much money freelancing, and the amount of paperwork is a lot.
So why do you keep doing it?
Because I'm really interested in the topics I write about.
I'm always fond of saying that that what we're doing beats making an honest living. I mean, here it is. I utterly validate the idea that your Schedule C and all the goddamn receipts that you have to keep, it's an infinite pain and so forth. And I am pretty pleased that the job that I'm about to start, I'll never have to work freelance again if I don't want to. I am making truckloads of money now. It's like, love it. And no more Schedule Cs as far as I know. And that is swell. But it's like, here it is. We are sitting at home. We are sitting in the offices that we have largely decorated the way we want. There is an ampleness. Well, not usually.
When you're writing, you're sitting in the office.
This is his office.
I know.
It's decorated the way I like.
Exactly. You can see some of the artwork, and I've got a whole bunch of Lynn Fauna stock I need to put up on the empty parts of the walls. But it's like we get all the good coffee and tea we want. We can dress like this, and it's like
you have to pay for the coffee and tea. You have to pay for the coffee and tea.
Trust me, I'm glad to do it, because drinking good coffee and good tea is worth the money, and it makes the words flow. And here it is, and I just bash away. I can play movies in the background or music in the background, whatever I like, and life is and I'm getting paid for stuff that's coming right out of raw, undifferentiated matter. So yes.
Since lots of people have been working at home post-COVID, that really gives you a taste of what freelance writing is like. It enables a lot of people to experience that feeling. I was talking yesterday with Patrick Hurley, who is a story writer who works in the game industry, and he is working from home. And he said that he works a certain number of hours per day and accomplishes a certain amount of work. And he said, but I can do it in the middle of the night if I want.
Yes.
Which is really interesting, because you can take off and have a 3-hour lunch. You'll be working for 3 hours that night, but it does give you amazing control.
This couch right here, I purchased this couch from IKEA about 20 some years ago. And the way I decided that this was the couch I wanted was that I had sprawled out to nap on at least a dozen different couches in the showroom there. And I said, this is the one I want. And lo and behold, it still serves that function. It did Thursday. So yes.
Quality tester at the Mattress Works.
Damn straight.
I was in a flip. I was interviewed by a freelance writer this week who's doing an article. I attempted to retire from freelancing for the Seattle Times, and I think I've succeeded. So the woman who took over for me ended up interviewing me about paint and house paint. And it was so funny because she calls me and then her daughter starts screaming. And she says, "Can I call you later?" And she and I pieced together the interview. And I don't have kids, but I have cats. And I have been in the middle of doing interviews where like a cat is swinging from the chandelier. And you're going, excuse me, my boss is calling me. Could I get back in touch with you in a few minutes? And then you go pull the cat off the chandelier.
Yes.
Yes. Our feline overlords are taxing.
Yes. The cats will come through here, starting at about 2:30 these days and say, "Is it 5 o'clock yet? You should feed me, and leaping up on the desk and just, and blocking everything. And cats are notoriously opaque. So yes.
We're supposed to be talking to people about what we wish we'd known at the beginning.
Yes.
And something, I didn't really emerge as a real person until my late 40s. When I worked at Apple, I really got it together. And Apple had me working from home and commuting once a week to Cupertino, which was amazing.
From Seattle.
From Seattle.
Yeah.
And what I learned at that point that I wish I'd known back when I was first freelancing is you need to invest in really good tech. Whether fax machines used to be really important, tape recorders, digital recorders, and not only do you need to invest in it, you need to have double. I mean, you need 2 of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I attempted to come back on from my office, and we've got to figure out what the problem is in there.
It may be in the software rather than in your office.
I don't know, but I actually switched computers. I went from using a desktop computer. I then jumped to my laptop, which is fully charged, which has its own station.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the most important, the thing I really wish that I'd internalized much earlier is whether it's just having notebooks all over your car, just having stuff always with you, is that if you're really serious about freelancing, you have to be prepared, because the story can turn up if you are a skilled freelance writer, you can cover anything. Yes. And if you are in the middle of something exploding, start covering it. I mean, now people just video it and call up the news station. They want the information, but they also want it from a skilled, credentialed person.
And they also want it from someone who happens to be there. And an awful lot of stuff is happenstance.
If you ever happen to be in a war zone and you are a credentialed reporter, credentialed journalist, call the New York Times, call the Wall Street Journal, go right in there, because they will let you freelance.
Wow. Yeah.
If you have a credential, you have a website. Send people to the website and say, "I'm so-and-so, this is my website, I've covered these things, and I am in the middle of exploding such and such, and I would like to cover it for you."
Mm-hmm. I like that. That's very good.
Well, and so it's important to have a website that includes the appropriate things in a way where people can get to it. One of the things that is newly necessary, relatively, for writers is having a website that is accessible and interesting. Karen came up with an idea for working on my website, which is important for writers to know about.
Yeah. If you've ever gone to a website, I used to design websites. Fortunately, I will never design another website. And the problem that I had was I would get clients and they would say, "Well, I worked for Microsoft and I want to continue doing coding and design. And I also raise parakeets. And I'm involved with this obscure religion. And I would like all of this to be in my website."
On the front page.
On the front page. And you're thinking, nobody from any one of those things will hire you when you see the other 3 things. And I devised a way to do a website that prevented people from seeing the other 2 things, even though they were perfectly well displayed there. Because on the internet, people only see what they want. And if you can give them a channel to follow what they want, they will not see anything else on the page.
Thus,
Thus.
for Karen, there would be, this is the experience of working with Karen, and this is her journalism, this is her articles about cats, this is her articles
Fiction.
about fiction, this is her fiction. And if you're interested in one of those things, you will click on that and then get down into the details.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have to admit that when I was in the journalism field, one of the big red flags we had about hiring people was if we're writing fiction, because there's such a division between the two. And there's so many lawsuits involved if the fiction gets into the journalism. Whereas if you go the other way and the journalism gets into your fiction, you're fine.
Yes.
People tell you that there's no emotional content.
When I started to write fiction, Deborah Doyle said to me, "This is very professional and it's not very interesting." And I was writing like a journalist. And she looked at me and she said, "You need to take off your corset." And she was right.
I remember similarly my ex-wife saying at one point when I was writing up some notes about something that she was saying, and I was doing it like egoless, clean, technical writing. And she looked at this and she says, "Jesus, you can squeeze the life out of anything, can't you?"
If you're doing technical writing, that's the right thing to do.
Exactly. So
that's something else that is, if people are looking at freelance, one of your strongest skills in freelance, either you have to say, I am going to write about this one topic, and this is what I will write about. It's my area of specialty. I know all about Russian oil, and that's what you freelance about. You cover the field, you go to the conferences. Or else, if you're freelancing, you just have to be able to write about anything and keep a straight face while you're doing it. I've definitely gone that route. I pride myself in being able to change my tone, change what I'm doing, change what I'm wearing, and write about just about anything.
I don't do that much writing, but I was helping a publisher copy edit a book of astrology, pairwise things. The author had written an introduction, and they said, "Can you write an introduction in the style of the author?" Now, I am not an astrology person, but I wrote an introduction that I could actually say with a straight face that would fit for that astrology book, in which the author would not think it wasn't necessarily their work. They'd probably remember, I don't remember writing that, but sure sounds like me.
I got one of my best contract gigs from a friend who I was in his office, and he had a bunch of works in progress, corporate stuff up on the wall. And he said, "What do you think of this?" And without thinking, I picked up a red pen and started marking up all the things. And he said to me, "Do you think you could write, the way I do in the tone I'm using?" And I said, "Yes." And he hired me on a contract basis, hourly basis, to be more of him. And whenever he had too much work, he just dumped it on me. Nice. And I would pretend to be him, and I would write just the way he wrote, which was not the way I would ever naturally have written. But if you can, this again ties into fiction. If you can hear these voices as a writer and do speech writing and this kind of stuff, that is great. That speech writing is one of the most lucrative forms of freelancing I've ever done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Fortunately, turning into him didn't take place in any permanent or large way in terms of dealing with me, because I wouldn't want to deal with him.
When you are channeling people corporately and you're writing corporate stuff, they often will say to you, "I can't get this out of my head onto paper." And you will sometimes think, is there actually anything in your head in the first place? But stay away from that. Assume that there is, and think about, if there were something in their head, how would they be putting it on paper?
This can sometimes backfire, because Karen and I took on a contract together for for something. And I looked at it and I said, this is going to take an incredible amount of work. And Karen said, oh no, this is going to be really easy. And then she looked at it a little more closely and realized that they were doing these intricate internal loops of ideas that had nothing to do with the external world, but were perfectly consistent within.
Well, product A was perfect because it is based on product B, which was based on product C, and all of these products were vaporware. This was actually my first experience writing pure fantasy.
Yes.
Sorry, I wanted to say, well, two things. One is that Bob, our esteemed host, asked my favorite bumper sticker because I mentioned in private chat with respect to your comment about stuff what you shouldn't link on the website, that in addition to technical writing, I also do, I've been playing the banjo for like 50 years, and I write slogans
It
for
seems like 50 years.
rude
To us, to your audience.
Yes, rude slogans for buttons and bumper stickers. And so Bob just asked my favorite bumper sticker, and I think that the certainly the most popular one I ever wrote was published in January 2005. Right about the time that W started his second term, and it said, "I never thought I'd miss Nixon." Mm-hmm. And side note, this is a bumper sticker or a refrigerator magnet. In August of 2016, some woman, a friend of the guy that I write these things for, was at a Clinton stump speech wearing that button. Clinton admired the button. The woman gave it to her. She put it on and extemporized several paragraphs at the end of her stump speech about, "I never thought I'd miss Nixon." So when I talk about, that writing buttons, is doing my part to bring about the downfall of Western civilization, I'm having an effect. So I wanted to say, of all of the things, I've got a long list of things I would have liked to know, and so forth. And the one that when I was writing that article originally years ago that I came up with that surprised me the most was protect your hearing. That we are in a very high noise environment. I mean, it used to be far worse when we had, a laser printer going in the background, or even a daisy wheel printer. And then we had CRT monitors, particularly the big ones with big fans and so forth. And the noise level is amazing. And even now with all of this stuff, if you want to have an example of how it is, go into your office and turn everything off, and the silence is deafening. We can't tell because it's all white noise, but this is battering our ears every single minute. And I used to have hearing that was apparently in the top 4% of all human beings. Just, I could hear up to about 22 kilohertz, and no longer. I'm going deaf, and it's because of this damn job. So wear noise canceling headphones, and be aware of this, that it's cumulative. It's not just me getting older. It's me getting older and being battered all the time by all of this noise.
I also want to talk to people about actually vision. Editors want copy. That there were these things called copy editors, and there were layers of them. And you handed in a story, and they edited and they edited and they edited and they edited. And by the time your story got into print or onto the web, it was perfect. This is no longer true. And there are also people who have titles of editors, and it should actually be something like gatekeeper, because they're moving copy around, but they aren't editing in any classical sense of the word. And my eyes are terrible. When I was a child, I thought trees were blobs. I didn't know they had leaves. And I now wear triple progressive lenses. And I have gone through phases where I've really, really struggled with my eyesight and my computer, and it has affected my ability to turn in really clean copy, and that is not good professionally. You really have to bite the bullet. If you need computer glasses, get computer glasses. Completely go for it. And I have to say something which maybe will only affect women. When I was young and I was a freelancer, when you're freelancing, you walk into spaces where no one knows you. And you have to immediately cause this person to trust you completely and talk to you. And you all know the story of Gloria Steinem. Her journalism career really took off when she went undercover as a Playboy bunny and wrote all the horrible, sexist, disgusting things that went on in the Playboy circuit. I started out as a rock and roll writer. I ruined my feet because I always wore very, very, very nice, stylish shoes. And then I worked as a reporter in Manhattan during the 1980s. And my feet are ruined. You know, I wasn't going to wear sneakers running around writing about fashion, or actually my thesis was on the drug paraphernalia industry. And I had to dress up for some of those events as well. So yeah, you know, keep in mind that you want to get the story, but you don't want to cripple yourself doing it. And then of course there are people who cover hugely dangerous things and parachute into war zones, and
there are dangers.
It will affect you for life. Yeah.
Yeah. God, that reminds me of a couple of rules of war journalism. Like once you have figured out how to get yourself into an impossible situation, plan your escape route as well, and never carry.
Plan the escape route before you figured out how to get yourself in.
And never carry more equipment than you can carry on a dead run for 200 yards.
And another thing that I want to say is I was a journalist at the height of investigative journalism. It was a very big deal. And journalism as an institution really fell apart in the 90s. And it's just starting to come back in. And the way that you fund investigative journalism, a lot of it's now done through grants. There are centers that for investigative reporting. There are a number of them, and they actually give grants to journalists for them to do long-term research. And some of this includes going somewhat undercover. And I have gone undercover. I've gone in wired to a mafia executive's office with the FBI in the parking lot outside.
Boy.
Now, but let me say, I was working for a newspaper, and I recommend that if you are going into any dangerous places, and right now a lot of that involves covering cults, covering militia groups. If you are doing this stuff, do not do it as a freelancer. Get somebody to you want to be hired to do that, because you need coverage. If you are a freelancer, that editor can say they don't know you and they didn't authorize you. You really, really don't risk your life unless you've got some kind of organization standing behind you.
And also make sure that people know where you're going and what you're doing. You know, you need to have somebody who is keeping track of you. This is true whether what you're doing is journalism or writing or just walking into the office of the head of the OTO because you found something that they want. Yeah. Which I had to do at one point.
You know, this actually brings up that a good thing, you know, about freelancing is camaraderie with other freelancers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm amazed at how generous freelance writers are. There's a very freelancer in Seattle named David Volk. And David, I said, you know, what are you doing? And he told me about some of the really lucrative gigs he was getting. And I thought, wow. And he said, there's a lot of this going around. You know, he didn't feel I was going to steal his gigs. And
if you could, you would have known you were the better writer for it.
Well, who knows? Because sometimes the better writer isn't the one who gets the gigs. Sometimes it's the most civilized writer.
That's how you got your humor writing.
I was in a competition for a freelance job, and I was pretty sure I knew who my two competitors were. And one of them is a better writer, but he's really difficult to work with. He blows deadlines. He tells you he's going to do X, then he turns in Y. and he's really a good writer. I mean, he's good. And I sussed it out, and in my interview, I stressed how incredibly organized, scheduled, and responsive I was to the assignment, and I got the gig. Because sometimes they are not looking for the best writer. They're looking for a professional writer, and oh my God, do not miss a deadline. There is no such thing as a freelancer who misses deadlines. The last one was Hunter Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody survives if they miss deadlines.
No.
Yep, it's all there are an awful lot of things to learn if you're going to want to be somebody who does what you want to do. And that's what we're talking about here with the writing, is both of you are people who have spent your life doing what you wanted rather than making yourselves fit a corporate mold. And is this something that everyone should try to do, or is this something that only a very, very few people ever manage to actually get to? And is that a good thing?
I, for a number of years, ran a group that I actually helped found called the Puget Sound Freelancers Association. And the idea was that this was aimed at technical writers for the most part. And this was, let's see, when was this? This was in the late 80s and then the 90s. And the whole idea was there was a ton of contract work out there. And so this was all about, people who were doing this. And I just kind of wandered into doing contract work myself. And now looking back, about 2/3 of my career has been contract work of one kind or another, and only 1/3 has been captive. And I wrote years ago, I wrote an article about freelance versus captive, making an informed decision. And the whole idea is that there are advantages to being a freelancer. There are advantages to being a captive, and they balance out, and it's a matter of choice. What do you want to do? And there's no reason you can't do one, the other, or even both simultaneously. So, yes.
But John, being a good captive will not make you a good freelancer, but being a good freelancer can make you a very good captive.
Absolutely true.
And we haven't talked enough about freelance editors. Now, all that contract work you were talking about in the late 90s or early 2000s, a lot of that was editorial. And I picked up a lot of that. And a lot of the freelance editing is, you will often, boy, that's scary stuff, because basically as a freelance editor, you are holding the hand of a writer or a publisher. Or
one hand of each.
But one of the important things there is, when I'm freelance editing, what my lesson there was, only freelance edit for people who have already worked with editors. If you try to freelance edit with somebody who, I worked 10 years for Boeing and now I've written this book on airplanes and I want you to edit me, actually, I would run in the other direction. But if you had somebody who said, I do a catalog every year for our organization and the company we were having edited has disappeared, could you step in and edit this year's catalog? That's what you want, because editing is about process. And if there's an existing process and your talent drops into it, you're going to do well. But if there's no process and suddenly your job becomes becoming the psychiatrist to the writer, don't do it.
No, you need hazard pay for something like that. I agree. I agree. There was a ton of editing work. It pretty much passed me by. I'm a crap editor. It's just not me. I write mountains and brilliantly, but I also know that my stuff benefits from editing. And I'm even actually aware enough at this point of my writing to know where I tend to go off the rails, but I don't worry about that when I'm writing. It's just spewing the words out as quickly as I can. So yes, and then I'll say to somebody else, okay, go fix the subordinate clauses here.
Well, we're running out of time here. We're getting up very close to our end. And what do you wish you'd known before we started this conversation about where this conversation would go? And to sum up.
I don't know. We should have smacked Karen's technology.
Once again, it's really important to allow more time than you think to make sure the tech is working.
Yes.
I think that's an important thing. Karen, anything?
I would have cleared a path to your office so I wouldn't have caused an avalanche. I never go into Tom's office. Tom's office is very much a one-person office.
Marilyn will not come into my office for about the same reason. I mean, it's like I've got this path, this visual path cleared behind this because I was just recently doing interviews for the job I'm about to start, and I wanted it to look good. I did not let them see this shit.
Yes. That looks a lot more like my office than what you're presenting.
It's like, and yes, I am working on cleaning this stuff up, sort of as a starting the new job, getting everything, a new fresh feeling. But these boxes back here, some of them are stuff that needs to go out to a computer recycler. Some of this is just boxes of stuff like, where the Ethernet cables go and things like that.
Yeah.
And
Apple one in there, I'll just take it off your hands.
I have all you could possibly want. And so things like that. So yes, it's like she doesn't come in here because the clutter depresses the crap out of her.
I actually have a different office for my fiction writing.
Interesting. So it helps.
I rented an 8x8 office in an industrial building in Ballard, and I go there to do fiction.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, Cheryl, that's kind of the utility banjo. There are others. I have half a dozen. So
yes, we now have a frozen Bob in the upper left corner.
I don't think he's frozen. I think he's
frozen.
Stunned.
He's moving. He's still alive.
Okay. Hey, good morning, guys. You guys have done a wonderful job.
Thank you. And
as somebody who's basically spent most of their career, about half their careers doing tech writing, I enjoyed it. And what I would have, one of the things I didn't hear you talking about, but I know that you were thinking about, was that transition process wherein you take everything you learned in your tech writing and apply it to your fiction writing, and take what you learned in your fiction writing and apply it to tech writing, but make sure you keep the lines there.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron did mention that.
I did talk about it.
Oh, that must have been while I was on the phone. Sorry. Yeah, because tech writing, so much of it is telling a good, in a lot of report writing, is telling a good story.
And having flawless grammar, punctuation, and delivery of content.
Yeah, it is amazing. I know I got a contract in front of me. They want me to go write them some reports, and it's like, yes or no. But anyway, I'm not here to step on your show because you've done such a good job of it, and forgive any of my enthusiasm. However, it has come to the end of the day, and I just want to remind people that we have a new book coming out here that'll probably be out in 2 weeks. We've got, you see that Karen person sitting there, Karen KG Anderson? Yeah.
Without a name tag.
I got a name tag, but it's okay.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, well.
Because
she is in it. We have a brand new, never before published story written for this anthology by none other than Adam Troy Castro. and a new essay that I can tell you what I like about it. It's guaranteed to piss off everybody. Jim Wright. No, I mean, I'm seriously, I've read it. I sent it to one of the editors. They read it, and they told me which part pissed them off, and I had the part that pissed me off. And I'm waiting for the feedback on the part that pissed off the other guy. But it's phenomenal. So, and the beautiful thing is, we're hoping to have Adam Troy join Jim Wright and David Gerald here in 2 weeks, which should be right after the book releases, because they are just brilliant stories. And Karen has got a story in there that is wonderful. I will just tell her. The across the board, the stories in this book have been just phenomenal. And we have some, and I'm just excited as crap. Oh, by the way, Karen, what's the name of the book?
Good question. I just know it as the Post-Roe Anthology.
Just checking. It's Post-Roe Alternatives Fighting Back. And I finished up my mock-up of the cover while you guys were talking, and I'm very excited about it. I'm not going to share Karen. Karen hates my covers, but she'll like this one.
Oh, good. I know what's not on it in that case.
Yeah, we put no uteruses on it.
It's a uterus-free zone.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like the Senate cloakroom.
Yes. Now, this is going to be, I've gotten to see some of the short stories for this. It's going to be an amazing book.
And we are excited. Now, last week, anybody who, all our videos are up on BQ YouTube page. Okay, so anybody can go see them anytime. And last week's video, we had 3 writers from the book: Sarah, Mara, and God, who was the other one? But it was incredible. We had one retired college, one active college professor teaching required English courses.
Mm-hmm.
One, I just quit after 29 years of teaching in North Carolina because I can't take government interference anymore, teacher. And one young woman who is got the unenviable task of teaching empathy to to kids. And all I got to say, I have never seen 3 women more suited to be on the same panel with each other. They so absolutely complemented each other and carried the day on when we were talking about reproductive rights issues. And here's, you'll like this one, guys. Somebody watched it, and they sent me a note that said, you know, they were a minister, a fundamentalist minister. And they said, usually journalists try and show both sides of the story. I sent her back a note. When would you like to be on? And then I called Samantha and said, Samantha, I need you to come on again. I was only going to put her up with one of them. Oh, she said, you know, I just can't make Sundays. Not Samantha, but the minister. And I was like, hey, you know, but this book is doing that. It's getting people's attention. I've got one of our writers is commented several times that they know that this book is going to get banned. And all I'm doing is saying, please, please, please. Karen, you should figure out a way to get us banned.
Well, banning works sometimes and it doesn't work other times. So if you're not one of the people that gets picked up by the mainstream media for being banned, it doesn't do you any good.
I think what we need to do, the best way to get it to get this going on get people to request their libraries to carry it once it's issued. And once the libraries are trying to deal with it, that's the best place to spot hot potatoes.
Yeah, that is good. Now we're
As
making
Bob
sure
Foster will tell you.
that's an interesting one. Yeah, I'll make sure I have the link when I send it out to everybody, because we are 2 weeks away from releasing that book. And I just got to say, now, John, have you ever published anything with us?
I have not. I don't write intentional fiction, so no.
We do essays as well.
Oh, yeah.
I've been thinking about book number 28 actually, and who knows? The title would be Hedtke's Law number 6, which is I know it's not perfect, but it's Thursday, and so I've been kind of thinking how this would work, and so yeah, maybe.
Oh,
I'll have to. This would be real freelancing because I'd have to start writing stuff and figuring out where it's going to go, and you know.
you dang freelancers, you're so organized.
John, I would love to see an essay from you on the art of compromise. How far do you compromise to get divisive groups together without creating something that is so bland that it does nothing for anybody? That's going to be the crux of
that.
That's the crux of the upcoming elections. Nobody is going to get a candidate who gives them every single thing, but how do we get them to the polls to pick a candidate who gives us something?
And in fact, there's a really interesting article in this morning's Seattle Times, the Danny Westneat column, which is about the Republicans and the Democrats are pushing completely different things in their election ads. The issues are no longer unified in any way.
Interesting.
Difficulty that comes out of that.
Well, I will say that Hedtke's Law, the primary, is something that doesn't offend somebody, couldn't possibly interest anybody. And so there may be something there. I'll have to think about it.
You have something to tell us about this, John.
Yeah, because we have Third Sunday, which there's 2 Sundays that I get to do anything I want to on. First Sunday and Third Sunday. Now, this Third Sunday, I'm bringing back editors and writers of the Row, post-Row alternatives, because, damn it, I haven't been this excited about a book coming out since I don't know when.
It's the first Alternative Truths.
Well, Alternative Truths, I was excited, but I think it was excited in ignorance. I had no idea what I was doing. We said, hey, let's put out an anthology. We announced this days before we were going to do it. And so we did it. Now, this time when we said, we're going to put out an anthology in 100 days so we can have it out 2 weeks before the election, I knew what I was doing, which makes it all this, the fact that we're making date just still makes me laugh. Oh, and by the way, Andrew Lucas, one of the guys on the comment section, he is also in the book. He wrote, Karen was a big advocate. I think it was Karen was a big advocate for his story because of the ludicrously happy ending. Now, I will admit, after the first time I read it, I shot up with insulin. And then when I went to read it again to make sure I wanted to buy it, I just shot up in advance, a little sappy, Andrew. But it's in the book. You got to have some happy endings. You got to have all the different perspectives in the book. So I'm glad we got him. Anything else you guys wanted to add before we're done? Because, Andrew says it's a ludicrously happy ending.
Well,
yeah.
That means there's play involved, because ludo is the Latin root for play.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I've read the story. Yeah. It is going to be an awesome book. And on that note, anything else you want to add, Tom?
Just thank you all for listening, and look forward to me being back in a month. And I usually figure out what I'm doing only a week beforehand because I'm trying to grab people who are interesting and current. And John and Karen are both people who are interesting and current.
I want to point out that when Tom's back in a month, we will just have had the election.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that's a good point. Yes.
Oh yeah, and so Tom, you may wind up having me sitting in my window longer.
Yeah. Or
because-
you may decide you want to use somebody other than me to talk about the election because I'm not
why
on elections.
Oh, dude! Right now, I just know this. I think the undecideds are gonna start weighing in, and I believe that the undecideds are going to flip 2-1 for the blue candidates.
Bob,
because
all the statistics show that the majority of undecideds, the majority of inactive voters, people who are registered but don't vote, they skew to the left.
Heavily to the left.
Yes. But
Well,
they
it is just right now. But I mean, can you imagine the idea of Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker in the Senate? I mean, literally, actually having those two people in the Senate.
We've had worse.
We've had worse. I can't imagine.
Where we've done worse than Herschel Walker. And don't use Alabama as an example.
Go back to the 19th century. There are some people in there who were significantly worse.
Well, I tell you this. I am just the idea of a snake oil salesman or a serial rapist
With brain damage and apparently something I just read suggests actual multiple personality disorder as well, possibly caused by the concussive behavior. Who knows? But
Is that hyphenated? Is it multiple personality disorders or multiple personality disorder?
actually, I hadn't thought of that. Both,
Yeah.
you know, like that there are apparently there is a long history of like actual different mentation going on, and it's like Jesus Christ.
The only other thing I want to say, Bob, is you will notice why I have these two on here, because they can keep interesting talking going forever.
Oh, God knows.
Close this down. This will never end.
Yeah, I think that. Well, I tell you what, Tom, the third or the second Sunday in November is we've got Sunday the 5th and Sunday the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
The election is on the 8th.
Yeah.
Hey, I might do a special edition of B Cubed Wednesday night.
Oh, watching the returns?
Oh God, no! I do not want to watch you do not want to see me watching the returns if they're going south. The year Trump got elected.
Oh man, yes.
I don't claim to be non-drinker. I drink very lightly. I had a bottle of really good rye whiskey. The next morning, I only had half a bottle of really good rye whiskey.
Wow.
I wouldn't have been
I
good.
watched that election in Florida with my mother, who's over 100 years old. And around 5 o'clock, she looked at me and she said, "Oh shit." I mean, that was actually one of the worst experiences of my life, was watching that election.
Oh, when Trump won, or
And I sat there till the bitter end.
it was, I mean, this minority rule shit. When was the last time a Republican won the actual majority of the popular vote?
Little before the turn of the 21st century.
I think it was Bush 2 re-election.
Yeah.
So think about it. I mean, it's been over. It's only one time in the last 24 years, or in the last 28 years, has a Republican won an presidential election with the majority vote.
Mm-hmm.
What's that saying about our frickin' democracy, guys? And now you've got the Supreme Court's going to be ruling on the legislative agenda, which is a way of basically trying to turn back the clock to the pre-Civil War, when legislators got to decide who the president was, or who the state was voting for. And so that all of a sudden went from it being a statewide election to a minority of the majority got to pick. And as long as Trump and his cronies have 32% of the vote locked up, that's going to be, every red state is going to be a MAGA state.
I'm very worried about that, but I'm also greatly worried about the fact that we are close to the 35 necessary Republican state legislatures to call a constitutional convention. So we could, in fact, have, have declared a Christian country or something, which means, as far as I can tell, there are going to be an awful lot of dead Christian fascists running around loose.
I think we're still 5 or 6 states away, and I tell you, there's another project Karen and I are working on, John, that will come see you for the cover blurb, or for a back cover blurb or something, because we're giving a lot of thought to those kinds of things. So, John, it has been great having you on board.
Thank you very much.
Karen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And Tom, it's just, God help us, it's great. So I'm going to punch end stream, but we're still live for about 10 seconds afterwards. So, I got to say one thing. Dr. Oz, bless his heart, giving a speech in front of Hitler's freaking car. You guys saw that one, right?
No, I hadn't heard about that.
Oh, yeah. Just Google Hitler's car Oz, and you will think you've gone to the land of Oz.
Oh, my.